folks, welcome back. And in this series of lectures, we are going to be learning about your joints or your articulations. So let's go ahead and get started. When we look at articulations, what we mean is where are two or more bones meeting together. And that's what everybody thinks of. But in addition, we have two other types of articulations. We have places where cartilage is going to meet a bone, an extra piece of cartilage. We're not just talking the hyaline cartilage on the end of the bone, but there's an extra piece of cartilage that can meet with a bone. Or our last type is tooth to bone. So anytime you see that prefix arthro, that is a clue that it is talking about articulations. Now, sometimes a bone will fuse with another bone where two bones actually grow together across a joint. And that is called a synostosis, the OS telling you it has to do with a bone. And this is why once all your bones have finally been developed, your bone count has gone up as a child and you have all those bones, some of them are going to fuse back down. So for most of your adult years, you will have someplace around 206 bones, but it's not a set number. So here are two examples of what happens. At this point, all of you should be well aware that the three bones of your coxal bone fuse together to form one bone. So right there, you would lose 2 in your bone count. But when you look at your breastbone, did you know that originally that was 6 different bones? Okay. And even at your age, it is still either 3 or 4 bones. Okay, so it's probably still 4 bones for most of you. All right. So when we look at joints, we're going to classify them 2 ways. We're going to classify them by function and we're going to classify them by structure. So every articulation will get a structural class and a functional class. It's both, not mutually exclusive. And functionally, we're looking at how much movement happens at that articulation. And structurally, we're looking what is connecting those bones together? And is there a space between those 2 bones, what we will call a synovial cavity? Does that exist or not? So look at this picture in the upper right corner and press pause and try to figure out where in the body that is and if that's the normal way it should look. So I will wait while you do that. Okay, so where did you decide that was in your body? Yeah, that's right. It's your elbow joint. And how many bones do you have at your elbow? Well, you have your humerus coming down, and then typically you have your radius and your ulna. Do you see 3 distinct bones? Well, on the picture to the right, you do. It looks like it's 3 bones just overlapped with each other. But what do you see in the X-ray on the left? Okay, so what's that called? That's right. This is the case where the radius and the ulna have fused together. So that is a synostosis. Okay, you forgot about that already. I know, it was the previous slide. Okay, so let's get started and talk about functional classifications. Okay, so do you notice the prefix arthro? So we're talking about a joint, and now we're going to put a prefix in front of arthro, and that's syn, S-Y-N. And syn is a prefix that means together. So in a synarthrosis, these are 2 bones that the articulating space between the 2 is so tiny that there is no movement between these 2 bones. So we say that this joint is immovable. If we replace syn with amphi, this makes the joint slightly movable. And if we replace the prefix with dia, the same prefix like you see in a diameter of a circle, which is a line that goes all the way through the circle, that's because dia means through. This is a joint that is freely movable. So when we look at these three types of classes, these synarthrotic joints are all just in the axial skeleton. The diarthrotic joints are all in the appendicular skeleton. And the amphiarthrotic ones you have to stop and think about, because many of them are in the axial skeleton, but some of them are in the appendicular skeleton. So what I want you to do is write these three words on a piece of paper next to you or put it up in front of your screen, because as we go through our joints later on and I am describing a joint, I am going to, at the end of every single type, stop and ask you, what functional class do you think it is? And I want you to be able to predict the functional classes, and you'll realize that you can do this. So you're not going to be memorizing this because you can predict it just based on knowing the structures. So structurally, we're going to classify them three different ways: a fibrous joint, a cartilaginous joint, and a synovial joint. And so once again, we're looking at two different things. We're looking at what is connecting, and is there or is there not a space between them. So let's go ahead and get started with this. And we're going to start with the fibrous joints. So number one, no cavity. Number two, look at the name, fibrous. That is telling you the bones are being held together by fibrous connective tissue. And there are three subtypes of fibrous joints. The first is one you already know about, the sutures in the skull. And here the connective tissue tends to be about 1 millimeter or less, okay? And so the sutures only connect the flat bones of the skull with each other, and they have these irregular shapes. It's not a line, as you can see, it's very zigzaggy. And those irregular edges add strength to this. Okay. So knowing this, which functional class are you going to put this? Is it going to be freely movable? Is it going to be slightly movable, or is it going to be immovable? That's right, it's immovable. It's a synarthrosis. The second type, oh, and here's the interesting thing about the sutures in the skull. If you had had a chance to see real skull bones, what you would have noticed on a lot of the skull bones, they have actually fused together and formed a synostosis. So that starts happening in middle age. When that connective tissue ossifies, you just have bone going across. So the second type of fibrous joint, and there's only two types, is called a syndesmosis. And what happens here is we still have fibrous connective tissue, but instead of being super, super short like this, it can be 1 centimeter or even a little bit longer. And so we have two places in the body where we have a syndesmosis. The first one is between the diaphysis of the radius and the diaphysis of the ulna. And that actually is what is going to allow us to do the pronating and the supinating of the forearm. And the other place we have a syndesmosis is in the distal part of the tibia and fibula. Okay, so knowing about that, do you think that's freely movable, slightly movable, or non-movable? Okay, yes, that's called an amphiarthrosis. All right. Oh, sorry. Did I say there were two fibers? There's three. I was thinking there's two cartilaginous, but there's three fibers. The third one is called a gomphosis. So go ahead and say that word, gomphosis. Okay. So what this means is a peg in a socket. And so every single one of your teeth forms a gomphosis with either the mandible or the maxilla. Okay. And so if we were to look at this, this is obviously a mandible because it's showing a tooth going in a downward location. And so we have bone, and between the bone and the tooth, there are ligaments, what are called periodontal ligaments. So those are pieces of dense connective tissue, fibrous connective tissue. And they are hopefully holding your teeth in place. So is a gomphosis going to be freely movable, immovable, or slightly movable? Yeah, none of us want our teeth to move. So it's definitely a synarthrotic joint. All right, so with that, we are done with the fibrous joint and its 3 subtypes. What's the second type of joint called? That's right, cartilagenous. So that's where we're going next. Oh, so our braces. So I think I kind of talked about this already when I talked about bone reabsorption and deposition, but your braces, when they tighten them, it pulls on the ligaments on one side and pushes it to the other, and so that allows that bone remodeling, allowing the tooth to shift. And that's why you can only get your braces adjusted every 3 to 4 weeks, because it takes time for that bone remodeling to occur. All right, now we're ready for cartilaginous joints. So in a cartilaginous joint, first of all, no joint cavity. Secondly, the 2 bones are not connected by fibrous connective tissue anymore. What they're connected by is an extra piece of cartilage. So we have bone with its hyaline cartilage, bone with its hyaline cartilage, and between the 2, we now have an extra piece of cartilage, and that extra piece of cartilage can either be hyaline cartilage or fibrocartilage. And you should have been able to predict that because you know there's only 3 places in your body. But the elastic cartilage, and they're not bones. Okay. So there's 2 types of cartilaginous joints. So obviously one's going to deal with hyaline cartilage and one's going to deal with fibrocartilage. So that makes it easy to think about just like that. So the first type of cartilaginous joints is called a symphysis. Now this word should look familiar. That's right, we already had it before with the symphysis pubis or the pubic symphysis. So what this is an extra piece of fibrocartilage. Okay, so all your symphysis joints have an extra piece of fibrocartilage, and they're all in the mid-sagittal plane. Can you think of other joints that you may have talked about, like in the previous lecture, where we have pieces of fibrocartilage between bones? That's right, all those intervertebral discs. So an articulation between T1 and T2, or L2 and L3, or C4 and C5, or L5 and the sacrum. Okay, so for naming the joint, you would just pick any 2 of the bones. Okay, do not pick between the skull, the occipital bone, and C1, because that does not have a disc there. So in addition to the symphysis pubis and the intervertebral ones, we also have a symphysis here between the upper 2 bones of your sternum, between the manubrium and the body of the sternum. There's actually a little symphysis joint in there. And so here are just some pictures showing symphyses. The reason why this has an E, because that is the plural. SIS is the singular form. And these, as you can guess, are amphiarthroses. They have some movement. So I know some of you may have thought for a second, well, I don't want my sternum, my symphysis pubis to move. So you may have been leaning towards a synarthrosis, but you definitely want your spine to be moving so that you can bend over and tie your shoes. So it's actually an amphiarthrosis. The reason why you can bend over so far is because each one of those joints has a little bit of flexibility, and when you put a little bit all together, that gives you a big angle of flexibility. Now the other type of cartilaginous joint is called a synchondrosis, which sounds like we're putting 2 pieces of cartilage together. And in this case, we are uniting bones with hyaline cartilage. And so multiple places in your body, but the first example is the epiphyseal plate. So the epiphyseal plate between the diaphysis and the epiphysis of a long bone is an example of a synchondrosis. So think about what kind of movement do you want to have happening there. Now here is the other place where we have a synchondrosis. There's only one other place besides the epiphyseal plate, and that is between your first rib and the manubrium. Okay. So between the first rib and the manubrium, we have an extra piece of hyaline cartilage. Now you're going to say, well, Dr. Powell, we've got costal cartilage all the way down 1 through 10. Okay, but if I am telling you that all of those others are not a cartilaginous joint, and you know they have cartilage, hopefully that means that you can figure out what else is in that joint besides cartilage. Yeah, they're going to have that space. Cartilaginous joints, like fibrous joints, do not have a space between bones. So even though you may not see that space on the drawing, all those other ones have a little tiny space in there. So what kind of movement are you expecting to have in a synchondrotic joint? That's right, it's the synarthrosis. Okay, and so with that, we are done with the classification and the first two types of joints. Synovial joints are much more complicated and there's a lot of structures involved, so that is going to be a different recording. So I want to thank you for all your hard work, and I will see you again shortly.